Warning, this video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and today I'm going to jump around a little bit. Hopefully there'll be some useful nuggets in here, and if not, at least I hope it will be entertaining. The first thing I wanted to do is shout out the members. What we're building in the members section, I am incredibly proud of. I never actually desired to have a member section. People kept asking me to start a Patreon, and I kind of was reluctant to produce one. But having done so, it has evolved and developed over time, and I am incredibly proud of what we've got going on there. So if you're not a member, please do consider joining. I will say this, it is for serious individuals only, so if you're not serious, then it's really not going to be the place for you. And if you want to ensure I see and read and respond to your comments, then consider joining the level 1 tier for the members. The other thing I wanted to point out, okay, is something I have been very, very good at on this channel is pointing out sentiment extremes. And the sentiment extreme I'm seeing in MicroStrategy at the moment is unseen by me in my entire career. The last time I said that I'd never seen a sentiment extreme so one-sided was at the bottom of the stock market in 2022. And I was pointing at that and saying, there's no way this thing goes lower. I've never seen sentiment so extreme. We've got to reverse. And where we are at the moment with MicroStrategy, I think, based on my own subjective interpretation, is even more extreme than where we were back at the lows in the stock market in 2022. MicroStrategy has driven people insane. And so I wanted to just ask humbly if you would be so kind as to challenge the argument rather than make it personal, right? Don't challenge the person, challenge the argument. If you disagree with the idea that I have sold out on my MicroStrategy position, if you disagree with me locking down gains and on a balance of probabilities suggesting that I think we've seen the high for MicroStrategy, then of course you're free to disagree with that. Okay, you can just stay long. You don't have to copy me. I'm by no means suggesting anyone ever copies me, okay? But I have never seen behavior like this surrounding a stock before. I sold out on my MicroStrategy position. I did the whole thing from the entries to the supplemental trades to the exit with full transparency the entire time. And there is literally a line a couple of blocks long on Twitter at the moment to burn me at the stake when this thing prints a new high, okay? So it's absolutely fine if you disagree. Like I said, feel free and please do challenge the argument, but please don't make it personal. At the end of the day, this is what makes a market. We need people to have differing opinions. We need people to be able to take both sides of the trade. And keep in mind that there is no incentive for me to call a top here if I actually think it's going up 10x. There is no incentive for me to publicly make everyone know that I sold my entire holding and currently hold 0 MicroStrategy if I think this thing's got another high left in it, you know? So I have a system, I stick to the system. The system has given me 6, 7, 8 very compelling sell signals. And I can only make 2 what I consider to be, and of course all TA and analysis is subjective, but I consider the only 2 arguments for being long very, very weak. So therefore, in my own personal situation, I cannot possibly stay long when I can make 6 or 7 or 8 very, very compelling sell side arguments and 2 very lackluster reasons for remaining long. And before we move on to the next portion of this, okay, I just wanted to point one thing out. Because I know a lot of people show up to markets and they play in this space, okay? They're here to speculate, gamble, they've got regular 9-to-5 jobs and all of this kind of stuff. Everyone is here for different reasons. But please understand, this is what I do for a living. This is how I put meat on the table for my family. This is how I ensure my wife and my mother never want for anything, okay? So to disrespect your capital is entirely your prerogative. But please don't get mad at me for respecting mine, okay? To disrespect my capital is also to disrespect my family's quality of life. So again, if you disagree, by all means stay long. If you disagree, by all means let me know in a respectful manner why you think I'm wrong. Okay, and by all means, if we see a new high printed, I will come here as I always do with full transparency, hold my hands up in front of everyone and tell you I got that wrong, okay? But my own personal situation is I made returns on this stock that I will likely never see again from a single stock in my entire career, and I had to lock down those gains. Like I said, I'm not going to disrespect my family's well-being because some people on the internet think it's got another 50% of upside left in it, okay? So I want this to be a respectful community. I want this to be a place where people can have a disagreement. Just please be respectful. And if you want to actually engage with me and the other members, then please feel free to consider having a look at the perks. There's a link in the description and the pinned comment for joining the memberships, and you can see what each tier offers. So as promised, I'm going to continue to jump around here. Okay, I wrote this yesterday. Max drawdown equals 10 times average risk per trade. Very, very few. Right, and you can see just how few engagements this thing got. No one really knows. And so the reason I put this here mostly was to remind me to cover it today. I have a tutorial in the playlist on how to manage risk, and it uses a 2% and 6% rule. And I had a few people over the last week or so asking me, is it okay to have 4% risk per trade? Is it okay to have 6%, 10%, whatever? Because they don't like the idea of having the vast majority of their accounts sat there in cash, because this is viewed as inefficient. But the reality is max drawdown equals 10 times average risk per trade. So what this really means is if you risk 2% on every single trade, your max drawdown that you could experience during stressed conditions or a poor performance stint from yourself would be 20% account drawdown. But you can see straight away with this rule, if you trade 4% average stop loss of your total account, then that 10 times rule means at some point you're likely going to experience a 40% account drawdown. If you're trading 6% risk per trade, which is of course different to the sector risk rule, then you can expect at some point to draw your account down by 60%. So again, very, very, very few understand risk. Very, very, very few understand how important it is to actually have a risk management strategy in place. And the absolute truth of the matter is the reason most people are not profitable long term, and of those people that are profitable, most of them have very lackluster performance. Most of them can't outperform an S&P 500 tracker. So even many of the people that are in the profitable traders section would actually just be better off DCA in an S&P 500 tracker, right? And there's a reason for that. And it's because very few people understand the mathematics behind risk management. If you exceed this 2% per trade rule, you are very quickly going to experience very severe drawdowns, particularly if you're going to have a career longer than about 2 or 3 years. Also, mathematically, it's much easier to fight your way out of a 20% hole than it is a 40 or a 60% hole. So if you haven't seen the risk management video, there's a tutorial in the playlist. Highly, highly, highly recommended to watch it. And it has very few views, which tells me most people watching my channel don't actually make money in the long term. They're not going to have any chance of actually doing this for a living. And take a screenshot of this. Make sure you internalize it, okay? There's a reason for everything. Continuing to jump around, okay? Fartcoin continues to be my favorite part of this cycle. This has honestly been the thing that I've enjoyed watching the most this entire cycle. And I'm sure this is something I'm going to look back on fondly and laugh about for the rest of my life. Fartcoin is now approaching $1 billion market cap. 820 million. Now, the reason I find this so funny is if you're in the UK, you probably have heard of the company Wix, right? There's like 3 Home Depot type stores that we have in the UK. There's B&Q, Homebase, and Wix. Now, for anyone to put this in perspective for just how insane this is and why I think this is so funny. Okay, Wix with a store all over the country, right? They've got one in every county or one in every town, right? There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of staff. Builders and tradesmen and plumbers go into these things on a weekly, or even daily basis to buy parts and all of this kind of thing. And Wix has a market cap around 1/3 of Fartcoin. I just think this is so funny. The way that society and markets and everything else is currently putting valuations on things, right? How is it that you can have all of these stores? I'm sure Mr. Wix started with just one little humble store, right? Probably scaled this business and scaled it and took risk and took loan and took on debt and then, scaled some more and hired some people and fired some people and blah, blah, blah. Eventually becoming the Home Depot or, the equivalent in the UK, one of the top 3 in terms of size and scalability. And after all those hard-working years, after all of those products and services, all of those stores, one in every town in the in the country, right? A whole massive online warehouse store that you can buy from online as well. After all of that, it amounts to 1/3 the valuation of Fartcoin. So I'm never going to forget this. Like I said, this is my favorite thing to watch. And I guess, it seems only reasonable that we're going to hit a bill, doesn't it? I mean, I hold none of this. I don't suggest anyone buy any of this, okay? But I'm championing the bill. I'm not going to lie. I want to see the billy hit. And I want to see this thing continue to work its way up. I think if you rank this in terms of the companies on the stock market in the UK, this is currently sat somewhere around 270. It's the top 270 companies by market cap. If this was to be a stock, okay. So absolutely wild times, and yeah, I'm rooting for it. Okay, let's see how high this thing can go. Fantastic times. Speaking of Fartcoins, every alt season has started with a move away from the 2-month super trend downtrend line, as Tony the Bull points out here. But what if this thing is about to flip to a buy signal? What if we see this? Would that not be insane? It's not a call or a prediction, but again, I just love to sit back and watch these kind of things unfold. My brother Nasco here has showed us that the Bitcoin dominance chart is so far showing us a fake out below support and what looks to be a recovery. So I don't think too many people had it on their bingo cards that this wasn't a real breakdown and that we would be potentially targeting 70% plus now. Now, again, this could certainly just be a little bounce that resolves to the downside and maybe everyone gets their big alt season. Okay, who knows, right? Nobody knows at this point in time. But something about this tells me on a balance of probabilities it's probably going higher, and I still think the pain trade is a 70% dominance. Continuing to jump around once more. Are we doing this? Are we actually doing this? I put this out a while ago and said, what do you see? The yellow is the fractal from the Nasdaq.com bubble, and the Dow seems to be tracking it pretty closely, to me at least. Fast forward to today, and it almost seems like we're ready to accelerate, doesn't it? It almost seems like we've started to accelerate. So I don't know. Is this possible? I would love absolutely nothing more than to see this giant fourth angle, because we've already got 3 coming in right here, okay? So is it possible that we're now about to stage a fourth? Because that would just be insane. It would make our lives a lot easier to sell the top on the fourth breakdown. So I don't know about you, but I'm rooting for this as well. I would love to see nothing more than for this to continue to push to the upside. Absolutely wild times. I see Bob Lucas is getting increasingly bullish on everything across the board. He is calling for another right translated cycle into the early January timeframe, and then it might be time for a left translated daily cycle before we collapse into a weekly cycle low. For those of you that know about this, okay, we got a weekly cycle low here. This is 1 right trans daily cycle. This is 2 right translated daily cycles. If we do this, it will be 3 right translated daily cycles. And again, then the 4th is expected to left translate and fail down into that weekly cycle low timeframe. Also, it's worth pointing out, Bitcoin's weekly cycle is in the same spot. It's due a daily cycle low early Jan, and it will be its final daily cycle before it starts to hunt and head down into a weekly cycle low, by my count at least. So the stocks and Bitcoin are in sync to do something like this, which tells me whether or not this remains the top, and then we're going to go full bore bear market recession, early top for Bitcoin. Maybe that's on the table, maybe it isn't. But if nothing else, we are certainly going to get a shakeout and a big correction in the S&P 500 at the minimum into that weekly cycle low. And we're also probably going to get a nasty and violent correction for Bitcoin. I would speculate if Bitcoin is going to continue to behave as expected, then we may well see a push to about 120, 130k for the top of this daily cycle low early Jan, and then some big blow off top move to 150, 170k, something like that. And if that's the case, I would largely be expecting that to be a very nice area to take profit. And on top of that, we're also in our 5th weekly cycle low since the 2022 bear market low. We desperately are in need of a yearly cycle low, and by my count, a 4-year cycle low. Now, it's of note, Bob and I have different counts at the moment. I think mine's right, but I'm sure he thinks his is too. Andrew is pointing out what I've been mentioning of late, which is we can't rule out a very hard, very fast decline once this weekly cycle low prints. And that's, of course, due to how right translated this current weekly cycle low is. Remember, the longer we go up for, the more sharp and sudden the drop is expected to be. And that low may happen just 4 to 6 weeks from the top. So pretty wild. Speaks to seeing some kind of C19 plunge type deal unfolding, doesn't it? And the last thing I wanted to hop into before we point at some charts is China's economy is experiencing its largest financial collapse since 2002. The 10-year Chinese government bond yield is now at 1.75%, and the 30-year bonds are below 2%. Banks are insolvent. Leverage is 350% of the reported GDP, which is most probably not even the real numbers. So we've long been making the case on this channel that China would likely be the leading indicator for the deflationary collapse. And we are seeing this unfold in real time. I really do still maintain that we are going to see something akin to this unfold in the US markets as well. So for now, long and strong, expecting more rallies into the end of the year across the board, but we continue to look at China and say, we think we know what's coming next. I'm not going to spend too much time on MicroStrategy apart from a nod to the if you know, you know crew, okay? High, lower high so far. It can change and it can change quickly, but it has not changed yet. Also, Dixie at 107. So let's see. Are we going to make a lower high here and roll over and fail? If so, we put the downside scenario on the table. Or are we about to take out this high, confirm a right translated daily cycle, and then be looking out to China to think we know what comes next there as well? And speaking of 107 for the Dixie, we've got 107k Bitcoin as of right now, emerging into price discovery, getting a little bit late, but there still could easily be a few more days left before we get the decline into a daily cycle low. Early Jan becomes the opportunity, I think, to load up one final time before I'll be looking to actually think about selling third, maybe even fourth angle violations. So long and strong there. Gold is behaving very much how it was expected to behave, right? We do appear to be in that final decline. So probably a few more sessions, daily and weekly cycle low, and then we'll be conquering that in a bunch of mining stocks. And the stocks keep producing new highs, new lows. So for now, at least, no real warning signs. Start to see the third angle broken, and I will be locking in the profit and being patient until we get to the next daily cycle low. But I mean, when we look at the Nasdaq, long and strong there, absolutely no reason not to be. The Dow Jones also firing a warning sign. So as always, I'll give this a day or two to see what happens. but likely going to be taking some profit unless this thing can reverse very, very quickly. And it looks like we've got a trend line break setting up once more. Russell 2K also thinking about a touch of support. So again, long and strong at the moment, at least. Oh, and I'm just noticing XRP. This is something else I'm very, very fond of this cycle. Everyone clowned on this coin forever and ever and ever. And I was long making the case that the path of max pain for XRP is for this to be one of the top performing cryptos, just because it was so hated, right? It was so one-sided. Anytime I spoke about any altcoin, no one really cared, or people were bullish or bearish or whatever. But anytime you mentioned XRP, people would come immediately out in the comments and say, you lost all credibility for talking about XRP and blah, blah, blah. And I kept pointing at this and saying, this is hilarious. I've never seen a more one-sided or a more hated asset in my entire career. I don't know why people have such disdain and hate for this thing. And of course, when people hate a market, then it only makes sense to see this thing melt faces and rip higher. So that's pretty funny. And I'll use this as a little nod to the Camel Crew OGs. Once again, if you know, you know. If you made it this far, I hope you'll consider joining the members. And I hope you won't get too wound up and too toxic, especially given that it's the holiday period. I know the holiday period can be challenging for some people, but at least based on these cycles, next year is going to be even more challenging. So enjoy it while it lasts. I'm your boy Camel. I hope you're doing well in life. Until next time, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel Finance got the markets key. Taking us normies on a